Everyone. My name is Stephen Kuhn, managing partner of Advanary Capital Partners and Advanary Services Group. We're here to talk with my partner, Miguel Zepeda, about the global markets in the age of AI. So just a little bit about me. I am a serial entrepreneur, founded or co-founded 10 companies. My first was in my 20s. Altogether, 7 of those companies were tech companies. One was an investment banking boutique, and one was a private equity fund in the wine industry. I also ran M&A for a public software company. And I started Advanary in 2017 as an advisory services and management consulting firm, providing traditional arm's length management consulting, but also interim, fractional, and full-time executive services across a variety of sectors and functions all across the C-suite. Today, our host is Miguel Zepeda. He is going to talk to us about global markets in the age of AI. Miguel, can you do a little introduction of yourself?
Absolutely, Stephen. Thank you so much. So it's nice to meet everybody. I'm Miguel Zepeda. I'm a partner at Advanary. My experience has been growing companies, both multinational and startups, for the last 25 years. In terms of investments, I have led around $500 million in investments, mostly into technology companies. I've done 4 startups myself, and then one of them was a digital bank here in the US that I grew to $4 billion in deposits. I'm an alumni of the Stanford GSB and the New York University, and I'm excited to discuss global markets today.
I mentioned earlier that we have 2 divisions, Advanary Capital Partners and Advanary Services Group. We're both a stage and sector agnostic investors, so we do not only venture capital, but later stage growth investment and private equity, minority and majority investments. But we also have our advisory division, Advanary Services Group, which is highly synergistic and complementary to the investment side of the business. And we're pretty unusual in the sense that we do not only early stage investment, but also the advisory side. Very few early stage investors have a robust advisory services group. We have about 20 partners in this space across the entire C-suite and across a number of industries, and we have a growing life sciences practice as well. So we also are unusual in the sense that we invest via an SPV model, a special purpose vehicle model, where every investment is its own fund, giving special attention to the portfolio company and providing a number of benefits to the LPs as well. You can see our services and the entire breadth of the company on this slide. The left side, the green slide, is the Advanary Capital Partners, illustrating the venture investment, but also the private equity side. And on the right side, the blue side, is the Advanary Services Group and the 9 practices we have there. I love to say, and certainly love to believe, that with all of the practices and the breadth of the services we offer, that there are very, very few companies in our target market, which is generally speaking in the 10 to 200 million in revenue range, that don't need some of our services today, whether it's revenue growth, intellectual property, AI, and strategy. We have a team of about 25 technologists, and our partner Tim Cap and Marcelo Labre on that side of the company. But we also have executive capital, board governance, impact, ESG practice, Latin America. And that's a great segue back to Miguel to talk about the international expansion and global growth practice at Advanary.
Thank you, Stephen. So my role at Advanary is to lead the Latin American markets. In the Latin American markets, we have a couple of practices. One is market entry and expansion, where we work with the companies to expand their footprint. The second one is growth. So we identify new business lines for companies, and we provide business services expertise. The third is a board strategy practice, where we support the boards as they work with the companies. We also have a multi-year plan development and execution roadmap for companies. And finally, we can assess the current business model and find target segmentation for the markets. The goals of this webinar will be to first understand the scale and scope of the AI opportunities as they exist today. I want also to help identify the challenges and the risk that entails operating in other markets. We also want to highlight the mistakes, find solutions, and define key success factors for your market entry. I'm also going to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A in case you want to pose some questions so we can work one-on-one on these missing pieces of information. The first one is, so this is a framework that Anne teaches at the Grad School of Business. The concept is that strategy is mostly a narrative that the management has to come up with these opportunities. And at the core of this narrative is the first question is where to play. Right? This is where, how do you choose the investment opportunities that you're going to back? And then once you choose those opportunities, how's that you're going to compete? Meaning, how's that you're going to execute the actions needed to create value on these opportunities? So the question is like, what's a good strategy, right? Can be done by management, or do you need help from the outside? We think that that's better crafted by a team, right? Where you take a look at the market, you see the evidence that there is in the market, and how you can assess these opportunities. And the way to measure success here will be either you're creating great value by executing the strategy, or you're capturing great value by executing the strategy. And the last part is this is not a one and done process, right? So this is something that needs to be by the management team. It relates to constantly testing and creating new opportunities for the company. Okay, so now back to the topic, right? So what's going on with AI? So this is an estimate by McKinsey, where they believe that the workloads created by AI is between like 3 to 4 times in the next 5 years. That equates to a required investment of $5 trillion. So just think about the numbers, like $5 trillion is just going to be required to meet the demand that AI services. So now in the US, right? I mean, so globally, we're huge investment, and the US is backing the same trend, right? So we heard the administration at the beginning of it made a partnership with OpenAI, where they're committing $500 billion in investments for AI in the next couple of years. $100 billion being invested right away. So this is a huge amount of money that's being put to work to create the AI infrastructure. Now, the companies, both the federal government is emphasizing the use of local AI, government, and the Department of Energy is currently issuing 16 potential sites to start like build term new data centers. So this is a big investment that's being done. So when you think about this, like $5 trillion they're going to go into for AI, again by McKinsey, where they believe that at least 30% of this is going to go into buildings, right? So this is the construction, the planning, the setup of the building that the data center is going to need. The 60% is going to go into technology. So all the equipment that is required inside of the data center to operate AI services. And the remaining 10% is going to be power that's required to complete this. As a new entrant, you need to think about where can you compete? Where can you play in the building, technology, or power generation arena? Now, why don't we do a little bit of a deeper dive into power, right? So what power means? So data centers rely on power to support the demand of AI. And this is just a study by BCG, another consultancy, casting a 20% year-on-year demand for power, which is going to double the power need the AI. So any company that's involved in power creation, power generation, or power transmission is going to benefit from this investment. The next part is, as we discussed, the buildings, right? I mean, the buildings are initially the data centers were close to the big cities, but nowadays, because of the demand, they're being built all around the primary markets are like pretty well covered, but we have secondary markets and emerging markets that are going to require the data centers. As you can see, Virginia, Atlanta, and Chicago are part of the states that are going to benefit on this construction. And this is going to require around 170 billion in assets to be invested in the next couple to double the size of the footprint of all the data centers that exist in the US right now. So construction, it's a booming industry. Now let's talk about water, right? I mean, so one of the byproducts of the use and demand of AI is the water requirements. So just Microsoft, right? I mean, so they've reported an increase of 30% year on year of their use of water. Google is reporting 6 billion that are going to be needed. So companies that know how to deal with water, how to process water, how to reduce the use of water are going to have a lot of demand coming from this opportunity being created here in the US. This couple of topics that we just covered. Many others that go into building a data center. So we need generators, we need switch gears, we need power distribution units. As you can see that the lead time to deliver was like 6 to 10 months, and now it's like 10 to 16 months. So almost a year and a half you have to wait for a generator to be delivered to your data center. Almost like 2 years of lead time. Transformers, 2 years to deliver those. So this is creating a massive backlog of demand that's not being met, that installed capacity is not delivering, and it's creating opportunities for new entrants into the market. So far, fantastic, right? I mean, so a lot of opportunity here in the US, given that we need like more data centers. Now, unfortunately, this is part of the economic impact that the tariffs are having. So, you know, the administration announced reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. This is creating a baseline of at least 10% of on all imports for like Japan at 24%, Europe at 20%, Switzerland at 31%, and China being the largest recipient. Now, as always, I mean, this is still fluid, and the administration may change their minds in terms of what's going to be the final number, but it's definitely creating a lot of uncertainty for the participants in terms of how can I supply materials and components to the data center. So a good way to deal with this, McKinsey will say, just to frame it in a 2x2 framework to analyze what are the opportunities and which ones should you pursue. On the X axis, you can see it's what they call the customer demand. Either the customer demand is shrinking or is growing. Obviously, in the case of AI, this is growing. Perfect. I mean, it's giving us the options on the right side of the matrix. Now, the way to think about tariffs is tariffs are going to make myself or the industry less competitive or more competitive, right? So obviously, the competition is going to be tough with the tariffs. So the best place to be is the top right corner, where you can see we have growing demand. And because of the tariffs, my position is improving in the market because it's leaving all the outside participants out. If the position is improving, but maybe I should try to protect my margins. But for the purposes of this webinar is how can we help you position yourself in the growing and improving quadrant. So fortunately, there are many activities that are not subject to tariffs. Right? So consulting and other professional services are intangible and do not physically cross borders. So it's very difficult to tax this at the border. There is no established business to impose tariffs on services delivered remotely. Any back office, accounting, customer service, planning, project management, all these general services that a company may need, they can be provided outside of the borders with like no penalties. The other one is digital software and software that's delivered electronically. So meaning it's through the cloud. It's not considered a physical good, so it's exempt from tariffs. So any software creation or any software that can be delivered via cloud, it's not affected by tariffs. So these good sectors where we can think about creating a new business line. One other way to think about like where to compete and how to win is to look at your activities, right? That some companies use, it's called activity-based analysis. And activity cost analysis, which is used a lot of in accounting to kind of come up with the cost of a goods sold. And then where you look at who is adding value as a product or a service is being delivered. The idea here is to identify which core business activities you have currently in your business. So sales could be production, customer service. Then what kind of support activities you also perform? Could be HR, could be IT, R&D. And then analyze the contribution of these activities to your value creation, right? So what's the revenue impact of your marketing activities? What's the revenue impact of your IT activities or your R&D? How's that you're acquiring of efficiencies because of these activities? Then benchmark and assess the market. You have a competitive advantage. Is it because train your team better than anybody else? Once you have that, then you can identify your expansion levers by activity. Scale this ability that we have to train our team. Can we scale this ability that we have to deliver software to our company? Is there any other technology that we can adopt so that we can deliver these activities better? Can we partner to expand here? And then evaluate how to perform can help support the expansion of new markets. The vertical expansion could be a horizontal expansion, and that could help you open up new markets. Part of the strategic discussion that we discussed at the beginning, where it's better to assess the opportunity, strategic ROI function, and where you test and learn the different hypotheses and come up with the best possible solution to the core. Now, steps here, if you really want to have this opportunity, you can definitely launch your US, but you need to be mindful of a couple of dimensions here. First perspective is what processes are you going to bring to the market, what relationships you need to build to take advantage of the opportunities. What kind of governance are you going to have? It's going to be, are you going to require a local board, or is it just going to be 100% owned by the parent company? What kind of IP protections do you need to establish so as you bring market, it's secure, it's protected, and you don't lose the value. From a regulatory perspective, just be mindful of fundraising here in the US to tackle these opportunities. From a financial, the accounting, audit, and insurance that you're going to need to operate, these are like requirements that as you enter the market, and it's better to have a good partner that can help you with this. From a compliance perspective, both corporate, payroll, and taxes, if you have local employees, they're subject to local labor laws. Have a good consultant that can help you set up the policies and that you keep them legal inside of your organization. And then there's always a little bit of the cultural shock, right? Like the different pays between the parent company. There are going to be certainly commonalities, right? We can think about like the tools that the company is going to use, like email, Slack to communicate, the cadence of the check-ins. But there are going to be a difference too, right? In terms of operation, also on the expectations on how fast, when things are going, and just like keeping an alignment both the parent company and the subsidiary. So this is where we think through what services you need and how to establish these services in the US. Close up, right? So as we discussed this in many ways, it could be a new line of business for you. It could be just a market entry based on your current business model that requires either a local subsidiary. It could be a brand new expansion where you're using activities that you already do at your company, like training, development, but you're going to create just a new market for these activities here in the US. So we have done this many times, so we are very familiar with the different activities and the playbook just to realize. Just to close up, so here's my contact information. Happy to engage any of you that want to have a one-on-one. We can spend a little bit more time of reviewing your the particular expertise that you bring to the table and how you can help and how you can realize the opportunity that we have here in the US as size of the footprint of the data centers to meet the demand of AI. And with that, I'm going to close it out for your attention and appreciate the participation, and until the next webinar. Thank you for the question. So the first one that we have here is, what common misconceptions do Latin American founders have about the US tech or the fintech landscape? Well, so I think the biggest difference that I have seen from Latin American companies that they try to enter the US is fintech is a regulated industry. So the first and foremost, you need to apply your business method or capacities to the local law. That means that an advisor that has local regulations is key for you to start doing business. Otherwise, I mean, you're exposing yourself to penalties in the company. The second one is that sometimes the Latin American underestimate how market is. As you can imagine, it's because of the size and the economic attractiveness brings a lot of talent from all over the world, right? So you're not competing just with the local companies, the Asian companies and the European companies. Some of them, they have been operating here for a longer time. So this is not a market where you can just do the minimum, right? You have to do professional services, because the companies in the US they expect a certain level of service, and they expect the companies to comply with that level of service. So just make sure that you comply 100% to your commitments, and you have the team to support these commitments.
Great, thank you. There's a couple other ones here.
The next question is, how do you balance speed and caution when launching in a new country with regulations? That's also like a really interesting question, right? Because you want to make sure that opportunity that you see in front of you, but you need to tackle this opportunity without creating liability or exposing yourself to a penalty because of that. It pays off if you spend time and effort the front end that is going to support the business endeavor. Second, build a team that you're going to need to tackle this opportunity. Experts in the market that can help you highlight what's the regulation and what's the expectation from a business perspective, so that once you execute your go-to-market strategy, you have a better product market fit for your company. Another question here. For companies with limited capital, how do you test being focused from your core in the Latin American business? Well, that's also part of the strategic question, right? Work that we use at the beginning of the webinar, where we are asking ourselves as managers, where are we going to compete and how? So the how is, it relates to the activities that we need to perform at the local, and where it relates to the investments that we're going to do to support these activities. So need to think about the business model that we're going to choose to enter the new market. If there's a limitation, the capital light business model will be more attractive. So think about marketing services or just general professional services that you can deliver without the need of like big capital investments. The other option is to do a capital raise here in the US, or set up a subsidiary based business plan. So as you can imagine, it's, I don't want to say easier, but it's more common for companies in the US to raise capital to tackle new opportunities. There is capital available, and it's just a matter of knowing how to raise capital or being or having an advisor that can raise capital. So I will encourage the companies to explore this option as well, so they can deliver the service most value for the company in general. If that requires capital, then by all means, right, like find somebody that helps you raise some capital to execute the plan that you have in mind. At Pantry, we have this as a practice where we help companies raise capital to realize the business opportunities that they see in front of them. And then in terms of how that this is not going to be a distraction from your core function, you need to set it up as a independent subsidiary. Right? That's probably like the best way to do this. So it needs to be like an independent team with an independent mission and strategy to execute with structures, so that as they go through the motions, it's not a distraction or a drain for the parent company.
Got it. Thank you, Miguel. Yeah, one last question here.
Perfect. So we have one last question here. How do you approach customer acquisition differently in a mature market like the US versus an emerging one? So this relates that you need to execute here in the US. So once you enter a new market, the go-to-market needs to be tailored to the specific demographic or the specific market that you're going after. So this requires the knowledge on and sales motions. And obviously at Advantage, we have a go-to-market strategy team that can all the materials and the playbooks that you need to execute to start acquiring customers here. So this is, again, subsidiary strategy, the same way that you need to be mindful of all the legal and all the compliance functions. You also need to execute and set up a dedicated go-to-market team here in the US that helps you acquire the customers that you need. Remember, most of the times, if it's a new business, you're not going to have the local connections to start securing customers, which is what happens for most of the Latin American companies, that since they're local, they already have the connections and that helps them with customer acquisition. Here, you're going to have to go through like professional sales services where you target a group and then you go through a sales process where you do a discovery with them, you present the offer, and you create the value.
Thank you, Miguel. Definitely insightful conversation. Hopefully everyone walked away with some talking points. And again, feel free to reach out to Miguel. He has his contact information posted. And if not, feel free to reach out myself or Angela. And we hope to see everyone at a future webinar event or in person. Thanks again, Miguel. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you, Alex. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.